A criminal since the age of 7, Nathaniel bar-jonah was described as an infant as being inactive and having an insatiable appetite, causing him to cry without interruption whenever not being fed. As a result, Nathaniel gained so much weight as a baby that he became virtually immobile due to underdeveloped muscle tone, and his parents struggled to carry him. Later in life, he stated in his biography, "I just love to eat. I don't get enough food. I'm always hungry, and that's why I'm fat." Warning that the crimes I'll be describing are horrific and get progressively worse. Later in childhood, Nathaniel often stole from his siblings and other children. In July 1964, when he lived in Florida, at the age of 7, he lured his 5-year-old neighbor into his basement by telling her that he had received an Ouija board for his birthday that could tell fortunes. Once in the basement, Nathaniel attempted to strangle the girl, but her screams attracted the attention of his mother, who came to her rescue. But bar-jonah escaped unpunished. In 1973, when he lived in Massachusetts at the age of 15, Nathaniel cut letters and words from magazines, using them to write a note in which he tried to lure 2 young boys to a cemetery by offering them $20 and a surprise. In that case, the mother of the 2 boys declined to press charges against him. She thought it would be best if he got psychiatric help and felt she couldn't get it through the criminal justice system. A year later, still a minor, Nathaniel kidnapped and forced himself on a 10-year-old Mary Patrone, later releasing her. In late March 1975, Nathaniel, then 18 and still in high school, kidnapped 8-year-old Richard O'Connor, posing as a police officer on his way to school, and then forced himself onto and strangled him. A neighbor looking out the window noticed the young boy being abducted and reported it to authorities, who began searching for the boy. Later, the patrol car found the vehicle used in the crime parked far away from the others in the parking lot and ordered Nathaniel out of the car. O'Connor was found in the car, bloodied, also having defecated and urinated himself as a result of the attack, and close to passing. He was put on probation for this. A few days before his high school graduation, Nathaniel drove to nearby Hartford, Connecticut, impersonating a police officer once again to kidnap a 9-year-old girl, but when the child began vomiting and convulsing from the depraved crimes he was committing on her, he drove next to the sidewalk, throwing her out of his car. A nearby witness saw the incident and obtained his license plate, which led to his arrest. His probation officer was never made aware of this attack, and he was free less than a year later. After his probation ended, he received a letter thanking him for his cooperation. 2 years later, Nathaniel, who claimed to be an undercover FBI agent, picked up 2 boys in his car from the local cinema. He then transported the boys to a remote area where he handcuffed them and tortured them. After repeatedly jumping on one of the boys' chests, the 375-pound Nathaniel thought he had taken his life and taking off with the others still alive in his trunk. However, the first boy regained consciousness and managed to find help, which led to Nathaniel's arrest shortly afterwards. The other boy was found alive in the trunk. For that crime, Nathaniel was convicted of attempting to take someone's life and given the maximum sentence of 18 to 20 years. But was later transferred and sent to a psychiatric hospital, a treatment center specializing in sexually dangerous offenders, for observation because of fantasies he shared with a prison psychologist. At the end of the observation period, he was sentenced to an indefinite term at the hospital. 7 years later, he changed his name to Nathaniel Benjamin Levi bar-jonah. His birth name was David Paul Brown. He gave several reasons for changing his name. He told his friends and relatives that he wanted to know what it was like to be discriminated against and prosecuted as a Jew. Later, in an interview for the TV show Most Evil, he claimed to be Jewish and wanted his name to reflect that. In fact, Brown's ethnicity was Scandinavian, and his parents were both active in Assemblies of God, a Pentecostal movement, and he did not pursue any further connection to Judaism beyond the name change. Later that year, Nathaniel won a parole hearing with 2 psychiatrists who evaluated him, who said he no longer posed a threat to society. A judge in Massachusetts ruled that the state had not proven that Nathaniel was dangerous and ordered his release on February 12, 1991, about 14 years after he was sentenced. Administrative problems prevented bar-Jonah's release until July of that year. During that time, he confided to a psychiatrist that he had dreams about kidnapping, hurting, and cannibalizing children, informing them that his interest in torture has been with him since early childhood and that his primary means of arousal came from the violent thoughts he entertained. Bar-Jonah's previous requests to be released from the hospital were initially denied because of his psychiatric evaluations noted his violent fantasy life as well as a danger to the community. On August 9, 1991, just a month after being released from the hospital, Nathaniel found a 7-year-old boy sitting alone in a car outside a post office. Nathaniel, who weighed 275 pounds at the time, got into the vehicle and sat next to the boy. Some witnesses, along with the boy's mother, observed the incident and ran to help the boy, causing Nathaniel to flee. The officer recognized the description of Nathaniel from more than 15 years earlier and later was arrested for the attack. He initially claimed that he got in the car to get out of the rain, but later admitted he intended to take the boy's life. Nathaniel pleaded guilty to battery in exchange for 2 years of probation and promised to move to Great Falls, Montana to live with his mother. 5 years later, on February 6, 1996, 10-year-old Zach Ramsey left the apartment he shared with his mother at approximately 7:34 a.m. to go to school, taking his usual route down the alley. He never went to school that day. Ramsey wore a blue denim jacket with green sleeves, a blue football shirt with his last name printed in gold letters on the back, stonewashed jeans, and bright high-top sneakers. A family of 3 who lived in an apartment in the alley said they saw Zach there that morning and that they also saw an off-white 4-door car that almost ran over him. Another witness said he saw Zach standing in the street and appeared to be waiting for someone. Another witness who lived at the end of the alley said he saw Zach crying around 7:45 a.m. with a grumpy, obese grown man a few meters behind him. A witness who knew Nathaniel personally said he saw him standing next to the dumpster taking out the trash in the alley at 7:15. He said he was wearing a dark blue jacket. The same witness later reported seeing Zach enter the alley and that Nathaniel was still standing next to the trash can. Zach disappeared and was never found. School officials contacted Zach's mother when he did not show up for classes during the day. She filed a missing persons report. Later in the afternoon, the FBI gave the detective who was assigned to the case the list of local registered offenders, but he ignored it and focused his suspicions on Nathaniel, who was not on the list. He sought a warrant to search the property after police tried to enter the home where Nathaniel and his mother lived together, but were denied. Soon after a second unsuccessful attempt to obtain a new search warrant, Nathaniel moved out of his mother's house. 4 years later, Nathaniel was seen outside the elementary school for the 3rd time in a week. He wore a dark blue jacket, a hat, and carried 2 pepper sprays, a toy weapon, and a badge. He was charged with impersonating an officer and carrying a concealed weapon. A judge approved a search warrant of both the house he shared with his mother and his new address. Police found clothes and accessories to help him impersonating an authority figure, such as a hat reading security, as well as 2 albums of cutout photos of children, a document about nuts and bondage, and an article titled Autoerotic Asphyxiation. A police investigation conducted years after Zach Ramsey's disappearance revealed that Nathaniel had access to his mother's off-white 4-door 1978 Toyota Corolla on the day the boy disappeared, and that his mother and brother were out of town for a funeral. In addition, it was established that he did not work on February 6, 1996, or the days preceding it. 2 days later, a new search warrant was obtained for all documents and photographic material. While searching Nathaniel's residence, detectives found a list of 54 boys named Lake Webster, later identified as boys he knew during his childhood in Massachusetts. 3 of whom he was convicted of kidnapping in the mid-1970s. In addition, dozens of newspaper clippings following the Ramsey case, 3,500 photographs of children, and undeveloped film containing lewd images of Nathaniel with 3 unidentified boys were all found during the search of his apartment. Authorities also found a pulley that could be attached to a string, rope, or chain, which was attached to the ceiling in his kitchen. Nathaniel's former roommate described finding clothing in his apartment that appeared to match what Zach Ramsey was wearing the day he disappeared, as well as bloody gloves. Another roommate claimed that he sometimes brought up the boy spontaneously in conversations, once a few days before the disappearance, and another time when he said that Ramsey would never be found because he was cut up and the parts were scattered in various places. Investigators also found notebooks with seemingly random characters believed to be coded writing. With the help of the FBI and after months of effort, the writing was deciphered. In the notebooks, he described torturing and eating minors. There were also terrible recipes that used body parts of minors. On July 5, 2000, Montana police charged Nathaniel with kidnapping and forcing himself onto Zach Ramsey and 3 other boys. He pleaded not guilty to all charges. Prosecutors said they would seek the death penalty. Nathaniel's defense team convinced Ramsey's mother to testify on his behalf that she believed her son was still alive, so that the jury would not convict Nathaniel of taking his life, even though they were by no means convinced that he was not an extreme predator and a dangerous deviant. During the trial, then 36-year-old Mary Patrone identified him as the man who kidnapped and attacked her in 1974 dressed as a police officer, but the statute of limitations had passed and he could not be charged with that crime. He was sentenced to 130 years in prison, maintaining his innocence to the day he passed. Authorities in Montana were unaware of Nathaniel's criminal record in Massachusetts, which was cited by activists fighting for former sex offenders to be forced to register. In December 2004, the Montana Supreme Court rejected his appeals and upheld his conviction and sentence. He was found unresponsive in his cell on the morning of April 13, 2008. He was in poor health. His autopsy showed significant levels of cholesterol in his arteries, and the cause of his passing was ruled as a heart attack. Despite the objections of Ramsey's mother, a judge legally declared Zachary Ramsey to have passed away in 2011. Although Nathaniel was never convicted of the kidnapping and taking the life of Zach Ramsey, he is still believed to be guilty and is suspected of other unsolved disappearances, suggesting from evidence found during the searches of his residences. Evidence shows that he traveled frequently to Arkansas, Colorado, Florida, Massachusetts, Wyoming, Michigan, and Washington. He was also investigated for possible crimes in Canada, where he lived at times in the 1990s, but police found no connection between him and the unsolved cases. Janice Catherine Pocket, 7, went missing on July 26, 1973 at 3 p.m. in Connecticut. After leaving her home, riding her bicycle in search for a butterfly she left under a rock in a wooded area in her home. Her mother found her bicycle half an hour later, less than a mile from their house. Authorities assumed she had been kidnapped. Investigators believe that Nathaniel may have been involved after it was discovered that he was living in Webster, Massachusetts in 1973 when Janice disappeared. Webster is located just 20 miles from Toland, Connecticut. He would have been only 14 when Janice disappeared, but she disappeared only 10 months before Nathaniel kidnapped 10-year-old Mary Patrone. When detectives sprayed his garage with phosphorus investigating the involvement in Zach Ramsey's disappearance, the word Tita surfaced, leading authorities to believe that he may have been responsible for the kidnapping of 15-year-old James Theta Jr. of Massachusetts on the morning of August 23, 1973 at 11:30 a.m. James left his home to hitchhike and visit Boston. He was last seen 2 hours later near the government center in Boston. On August 25th, 1973, James was found in the woods just over the New Hampshire border near an abandoned road. He was naked, and the autopsy revealed that he had been attacked and strangled. His case remains unsolved. On the morning of September 30th, 1978, 4-year-old Andrew John Amato, his 7-year-old sister, and 6-year-old cousin were playing in the woods behind his home in Massachusetts. Without his sister, Andrew and his cousin went further into the forest. Eventually, Andrew fell behind and hurt himself by falling and losing his favorite toy. Then he started crying and running in circles. He refused to leave without the toy. At 10:30 a.m., his cousin advised him to stay and returned home to seek help. However, Andrew was gone when they returned to the forest. They say that he wandered into the road and was taken by a passing driver. Nathaniel was investigated for possible involvement in the Andrew case, though no evidence suggests he was responsible. Another case initially linked to Nathaniel was unsolved: disappearance of 14-year-old Amanda Dawn Gallion on the morning of October 13, 1997, around 7:15 a.m. She left home for school riding her bike. She disappeared on the way. Gallion was often mistaken for a boy in her hometown of Wyoming. Nathaniel arrived at her town on the evening the day before her disappearance, where he stayed in a small motel on the outskirts of town and returned to his residence in Montana the next night. Amanda's bike was later found on the side of the road. There's also suspicion of cannibalism in the case of Nathaniel bar-jonah. It is known he had an early interest in the taste of human flesh. Around the age of 6, he would pick scabs until they bled, then suck the blood from the wound. Teachers at his school called his mother several times to report that her son's behavior was bothering teachers and students. When he was incarcerated in Montana State Penitentiary, many staff and inmates noticed he behaved similarly. One guard said bar-jonah once had a scab in his mouth, and it appeared he was aroused by this. While incarcerated at the psychiatric ward, Nathaniel confided in his psychiatrist about his cannibalistic ideas. One of the therapists noted his bizarre fantasies describe methods of torture and extend to dissection and cannibalism. He expresses a curiosity about the taste of human flesh. Although he is known to be a ravenous eater who weighed more than 300 pounds, financial records showed he did not make any significant grocery purchases for nearly a month after Zach Ramsey's disappearance, but he could also have paid for all of his groceries in cash or had a good supply of food and meat. After the disappearance, he also began to hold cookouts where he reportedly served guests hamburgers, spaghetti, chili, meat pies, casseroles, and the like. To one woman who told him that she found the taste of his meat repulsive, he replied that he personally hunted, butchered, and packaged venison. He was later accused of assaulting that woman's son. At the time of Zach's disappearance, Nathaniel was working part-time in a kitchen at an Air Force base, also at Hardee's, leading to speculation that he may have used his positions at the two to eliminate evidence by feeding it to unsuspecting servicemen and women on military bases and customers at fast food restaurants, but there was never enough evidence to substantiate such claim. Detectives also found several recipes in his apartment that used children's body parts and were titled "A Boy, Pot Pie, French Fried Kid," and phrases such as "lunches served on the patio with roasted child" and "barbecue be some young guy." In his deciphered notes, he also referred to offering these recipes to neighbors. In one search of his former residence, authorities dug up parts of the garage and sifted through nearly 2 tons of dirt, where they found 21 pieces of human bone. Although the bones were later determined to be one of those of an unidentified African-American child, a boy between the ages of 8 and 13, DNA analysis revealed that the bones were not Zach Ramsey's, and the DNA sample did not match hair found in his kitchen. When investigators decided they wanted to examine the sewer pipes under the house where he previously lived, the owner told them that all the pipes had been replaced since he moved in because they were always clogged. Cases where children commit sick acts of violence intrigue me. with the psychological aspect of it, suggesting that some people are born with a desire to hurt people, and for the large majority of them, there's nothing any expert could do to civilize them. What do you personally believe we should do with these kinds of people? If there was any way to tell what people were like this, should we do something about it before they commit a crime to protect the public?